Welcome back to the Amanda Gervasi Show. This is the podcast where we talk about leadership, courage, reinvention, and the bold decisions that shape extraordinary lives. Today's guest is someone who truly embodies what it means to build success on your own terms. Sharon Weiser is a respected realtor, community builder, Buzz Conference ambassador, and the visionary behind The Veil. That's a space dedicated to meaningful connections, growth, and leadership from within. Sharon's journey is about more than just career success. It's about trusting your instincts, carving your own path, and refusing to let traditional expectations define what leadership should really look like. Today, we're talking about leadership, taking risks, the lessons learned along the way, and what it really takes to build a life and career that feels aligned and authentic. Hi, Sharon. I want to welcome you to the show today, and I'm so glad you can be with me. Sharon and I have known each other for a few years now, and I got to meet her at one of her networking events and then was able to attend a few of her events, and they were fantastic. And I know since then you have built The Veil and you've just continued to blow up and expand, which we're going to talk a lot about. But let's, and I think, give a little bit of background, your origin story. I think every successful career has a starting point. So what originally drew you into real estate and, really propelled you into leadership and networking events and being the woman that you've become today?
Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my journey here. I really appreciate that. And it's amazing looking at where I met you and where you've gone. So thank you for inspiring other women and asking me to be here today. I am a mom of four, and I was married for 25 years and lived in Cambridge, Ontario. My husband and I started a business, had two desks in our bedroom, and we built it to a $65 million business where we were 51-49 ownership, but he did the sales and I did everything else that needed to happen. However, I told you the split of our company because at the end of the day, I had to leave. It was a situation where I left in the middle of the night with my children, and that was the end for me. I had no job. He fired me and had control of all the finances and everything. So it was quite a time. We left with our garbage bags, and I never went back to my family home. And from there, I had to find work. So I really just wanted a job. Having my own business with my husband for all those years, the stress of it's all on you. However, now it was all on me and I couldn't get a job. I put over 140 resumes out, had many, many interviews, couldn't get a job. So I was also like really stuck in the trauma of it all and probably was in victim mode. And I loved when anyone would listen to me and would commiserate with me, but it didn't do anybody any good. So I decided to get my real estate license just as a way to keep my mind occupied and to grow. I did say I have four children, so I thought if nothing else, I can help them and, save them some money. So I did that. And in the meantime, I should say I moved from Cambridge to Vaughan. I did meet someone which was the catalyst in moving to Vaughan, and that
Right.
has been amazing. But I needed to move out of Cambridge for the I don't want to use all the narcissistic terms, but the smear campaign and all of that. I just needed to start over. So I moved here with two of my kids. And at the same time as getting my real estate license, I decided to start a magazine, which is called Kleinberg Living. And the reason why I did that was I didn't know anyone in Vaughan. So if I wanted to sell or build up a clientele, I thought I needed to make relationships. And so what better way to get out in the community than build this magazine, get to meet people, interview people, which was my foray into then starting a women's group. So it kind of one thing led to another.
Amazing. So you said you had a business prior with your ex-husband. Was that also in real estate or in the housing sector, or was it?
It was selling lumber, plywood, particle board. So it was in a completely different industry, like a distribution company. So it had nothing to do with anything. So I went to real estate, I guess, just because I could.
Okay, fair enough. So was there an interest in it, or was it just the market's hard to get into, and I get it, especially when you've been out of, I think, the job force. When you're an entrepreneur and you're doing your own thing, I think it makes it really difficult. And so it
The
was a
the problem with moms, right? I was so lucky. I mean, I'm not gonna discount the fact that having our own business allowed me to do the things I needed to do as a mom and have the business. But I sacrificed the fact that then when I needed to get out and get a job, they looked at me in the corporate world as, we were basically a mom pa family business, despite the sales, despite all of that. And it looked like I'd been out of the workforce. So there was all of that going against me. What was I going to do? Real estate just seemed like it made sense, I guess, but also I have had people say to me since, "Oh, you're one of the other, millions of women who do that as their divorce career." And I didn't really love that. I do think there's some truth to it though.
do, and I can see where that's coming from because, like you said, I think a lot of businesses fail to see, all those experiences and they look at it as like, well, you were just a stay-at-home wife or mother rather than looking at it, well, I was also running a business and I was doing this, that, and the other thing. And so I think a lot of women do kind of get stuck and realize, what am I going to do? And real estate is a fantastic avenue for that because, you get what you put in real estate, I think. And I know a lot of it can be luck too. But it really does. If you hustle enough, I think you can really make a great career out of it. And it's you're working for yourself, and so it's nice. So there's no limitations on it, and so there's lots of opportunity absolutely in real estate. So, you're always gonna have haters, you're always gonna have people that judge, but ultimately they don't live your life and they don't know, and obviously you've built so much with that. And, the magazine. So is the magazine still around, or did that just evolve now into the women's networking?
No, the Kleinberg Living magazine is now being published by someone else. So I started it and I guess I passed the torch along. I just, it does seem like in my career that since I've moved to Vaughan, I have a lot of hats that I wear, but you have to realize that you can't do them all well if you want to keep them. So that one, that one I passed along.
Yeah, and I think that's great advice. I think we tend to, as women, I think especially, we tend to want to wear a lot of hats. And I think if you want to be successful and you want to be effective, you can't do it all. And so I think it's important to remember that. And I think it's great that you recognize that and we're able to realize that if I want to do other things and I need to grow, that I need to pass that along. And so I think that was the right move because then it led you to other things. You started another networking, I guess, association for women, and that evolved. So let's talk about what you started and how it evolved into the Veil.
So in doing the magazine, it wasn't my baby, right? It was through a company called Best Version Media. So there are parameters around what that looks like. So for example, one of the things is finding women or finding people, I should say, to advertise. But it's funny, a lot of the smaller businesses are women owned or they need to get out there. And it was right, the COVID thing really changed the way that we are. And I'm new to Vaughan, so I don't know the whole dynamic. But my point is, people seem like they lived in isolation. And, I grew up in a really small town. You live in a smaller town too, right? So for me, I'm the type of person who I want to say hi to my neighbor. I want to know my neighbor. I want to talk to people on the street when I'm out for a walk. And that isn't necessarily the culture here. So I wanted to try to bring that back a little bit, which from the magazine, realizing that people were not really supporting each other or didn't even know about each other, to wanting to build relationships as opposed to connections with a business card. That's why I started the women's group. And since starting it, I think anybody who's attended does agree, we are building a space where women can be authentic and really build a relationship so that you come to me top of mind when I need something. And if you're not business related, but if something else happens in your family personally, you have the support. That's what I wanted. You have that support. So originally, it started out as opportunities for women to get together and network in a deeper way. Since maybe, in the last year when we rebranded to the Veil Collective, the point behind that is that Josephine joined me and she is working with women on alignment and bringing out, you know, things like inner child issues, the mother wound, the father wound, things that we carry that we don't even realize that they impact us on our decisions or in our daily life. So by combining the inner work, I guess this comes from my partner. He read our outline of where we're going, and he said, "Well, this is your life," which is funny because it is, in the sense that when I just was so desperate to make ends meet that I would say yes to everything, every client, every opportunity, every business. And none of it was generating any real money, but I was working, 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 working more and more and more. And basically miserable and still going through a divorce, which I still am today too. So there's all that holds over
I get
you.
it.
But anyway, the point is that now once I've gone through things like for real estate, spending the time to brand, spending the time to choose who is my aligned client, who am I going to work with, and then understanding what feels good. Like I lost what it feels like to trust myself. So working through that, now I see that women need to understand what's inside of them before they move forward. And if you move forward every step of the way with what feels right, you just pause within alignment, then you move forward. That's the first step. But the business side of it is the side that I bring to the table, which is now I see how important because how many women I've helped in real estate who just wake up one day and they want to start a business and they rent a space and they put up a sign and it fails 4 months later, all the money out and that's it. I'm not talking about, oh, they didn't know how to advertise all of that, but there's so much more that goes in. And I don't want women to fail anymore or be taken advantage of in the real estate space. And I have too many stories, more than, two hands worth already in the short time I've been a realtor.
And I love that you're bringing that up because I think a lot of women or just people in general, we get excited about something and then we run before we can walk. And I think it's important to take that leap. And I promote it. Take that leap of faith. If you want it, you need to go after, you need to take action. However, I do believe that you need to also deal with, you know, the root of any sort of problem as to why you're doing that. What's the why? And I think we forget that sometimes like, well, the why is I want to make lots of money and I want to be successful. That's great. But there's something else that's leading you there. And I think you need to understand that and really mend a lot of whatever wounds there are, whatever reason as to why you're doing that and understand it. Because I agree, you can rent the space and put all this money into it, but if you don't understand why you want to get there, you're that passion's going to dissipate really quickly, and you're just gonna be like, "But I spent all this money, and why didn't I make any money?" And it's more than that, right? So it's yeah, I agree. You need to understand who you are before you can really, you know, put all of yourself into something and before it can really be successful. Who are you? What do you want? As a person and build upon that and then take those necessary steps. And yeah, I think a lot of women, not just in real estate, but I think in the corporate world, in any job, we tend to be taken advantage of in a lot of ways because, like you said, it's like we need to prove ourselves, and we tend to wear so many hats and say yes to everything. And I'm one of those people, and that's something that I'm continuously learning and growing from. Where your value is not necessarily set on all the things that you do, right? And so you're not if you don't value your own time and you don't value yourself, nobody else is gonna value you and your time either, right? So it's knowing your worth and understanding your worth, and that's, one way in which that you can grow and build and be the successful person that you wanna be, but it's you really have to value who you are, and doing more isn't necessarily better.
I know it's so funny because I used to pride myself, and you mentioned it yourself, on being able to have all these balls in the air, and I don't know why that was ever something I thought was something that people would pride me on.
Right. I think we tend to live in this, like, burnout culture that if you're not burned out, you're not doing enough. Or you're
Yeah.
not working hard enough, or you're not gonna be successful enough, and I just think, I've come to learn and I have a fantastic partner that's helped me slow down and realize that you're juggling too many balls and you're never moving forward because you just have too much on your plate, and I realized that it's like, sometimes you need to separate yourself and figure out again, what do you really want to do? And then put yourself into that. Who are you? But yeah, it's burning yourself out is not going to make you better, right? Work smarter, not harder.
Mhm. But, when you think about how, for yourself, because I've known you and you've transitioned through a few things even in the time I've known you and myself, it's it's just crazy to me in a good way that obviously we're able to reflect back as we're growing on what's working, what's not working, and it's continuous evolution. I don't think anyone should look at whatever they're planning and this is the line and that's the way it is, right? I
Mhm.
think anytime that things aren't going the way I want them to, I don't look at that ever as a mistake or a failure. I have to learn something from it or just understand that it wasn't meant for me and something else will come along instead of putting too much negativity in it.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's hard for a lot of us to understand that because our society tells us to stay on this straight path. And if you veer off and you fail, well, then, just come right back on the path and get, and rather than saying, okay, this didn't work, let's pivot and try something new. Right. And that's not something that's ingrained in us. So we're really, I think, retraining our mind, rewiring our mind to understand that this one straight path is not necessarily the only path and that there's so many other things you can do and that these failures are not real failures. They're just things that didn't work. And you can learn from them and pivot and figure out, what does work. And you never know what doors are going to open. And so I think it is important to be open to that and to look for those opportunities that arise and to jump on them if it's something that aligns with what you're looking to do.
And, I was thinking about how many women I've met in having these conversations where they'll say, I'm not putting down men, but some of them was their ex-husbands or their husbands or just their own mind saying it's a terrible idea or it will never work. But they have a passion for it. And so it's just having those conversations and then, once we do the inner work, like core values, all of the alignment piece to it, is it a viable option for them or business opportunity and testing it. And does it work? Does it not? And then helping women to hone into what that passion could be that actually makes money. But just staying on, I know I said learning and shifting, but I don't mean that. I mean, if you know you're a aligned client, just staying on track to that because we all we all get sidetracked when we see somebody who has interest in working with us, like for me in real estate, that happens all the time. And oh my gosh, even in the past 2 weeks, I w- I wrote deals with people and both of them fell apart. And I knew going into it, it was wrong. And I still got sucked in by the fact that they wanted to buy a house. I wrote the deal and it would work, which it didn't. I didn't trust myself. So it's always course correcting every day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it can be difficult sometimes because you want the best for your clients, you want the best for yourself. And so, you want to be, provide those realistic expectations, but I think you're working for your client and you're hoping for the best. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't, unfortunately. But um like you said, we do need to try to align those expectations more realistically.
My learning from that now moving forward will just be to ask better qualifying questions
Mhm.
rather than we're working on it,
And I
That's
and
how
I
I'm
like that. Yeah.
myself.
I think that's important what you just said is what can you learn from that? And ultimately, it's asking those questions to see if it does actually align and maybe finding different solutions or maybe reworking the timeline for them. And so I think that's important is whatever happens, you're learning from it and figuring out what's a better way to approach the situation when you know it potentially isn't going to work.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think a lot of people appreciate that honesty and transparency. We don't always get that, especially with realtors. So that's a
Yeah, we have
plus,
a bad
right?
reputation overall for sure. And it is hard to stand in front of somebody and say that you don't have the answer or, and I don't know if you saw, but I do like to do commercial real estate more. And man, there's things that you can learn in that sphere every single day. And you're competing in a space that is a man's space. So you do have a lot to overcome there, you know, already, just because I don't think that people value women and our knowledge in that space as much. And then there's the sexualized aspect to it. And, I think that I wanted to be in that space because in the industry I was in before with my ex, it was also in a man's world. And I just wanted to step into that world to show that women can be respected and also be feminine I just mean without being sexual, because I feel like we sometimes lose our femininity when we get into a man's space.
Mhm.
And I don't think that we should. I think that we have a lot of skills as women leaders that we need to embrace.
Yeah, I love that. I love that because I do feel like what you said, we tend to do one of two things. Either we, I guess, try to hide our femininity because, yeah, we're in a male world and we feel like we need to act a certain way, look a certain way, present ourselves in a way. Or we go the opposite way and we're going to hypersexualize ourselves. And
Mhm,
so why not just, like I said earlier, value yourself, know who you are and be confident in who you are. And it's not about being one or the other, but just going in there. You're a realtor, you're a salesperson, you're somebody that's trying to help and educate your clients. And that's what you're going in as. And just be confident in that rather than, trying to compete as a man or sexualize yourself as a woman.
mhm. It's a sad, balance there, right?
It is. It is. It is. But I think a big part of it is just being confident in yourself, and people will feed off of that energy. And I think when you become one or the other, I think people can see through that and realize you're not really confident and it's an act,
Mhm,
right? And that's where you start losing that trust in people. So,
100% agree.
mhm. um, so you've come a long way. You haven't been a realtor your whole life. Talk to me about um, some of the struggles and something you've really learned, I think, and that aha moment where this is what you're supposed to be doing.
Well, it actually, sometimes it takes someone else seeing something in you to bring it out. Well, at least for me. So I got into real estate. I'm here in Vaughan. And I met people along the way who I guess knew a little bit about my past. So over the past 2 years, not only was I in real estate, but I also was the manager of the Keller Williams brokerage in Vaughan. And part of that was to recruit people, but also to mentor them along their journey. And I think at the end of the day, we talked about this before, authenticity, honesty, and just hearing people and giving them what they need was what I learned more than anything. And I think that that doesn't exist so much in the real estate world because we're told to, do a certain number of cold calls per day and door knocking and just continue, continue, continue. And that never resonated with me because it's not building relationships. And I want to have quality in my relationships, whether it's 5 or 25, than 100 people I don't know. So, when I was mentoring or, helping bring other people into that brokerage, I just led from that philosophy instead of what real estate offices want, I guess, more than ever. And I feel like it worked. That brokerage has since dissolved. Now I'm at another brokerage and I'm doing just onboarding here, and I'm still in relationship with all of those people, and they still reach out to me to give them encouragement, if nothing else.
Right. I love that. I think that's so important that it's not always about the quantity, but the quality of relationships that you build. And ultimately, they work hand in hand because I think once you build those strong rapports with people, it will continue to grow and build because word of mouth is huge. And they start realizing, you know, Sharon's fantastic and she's honest and she puts in a lot of her personal time to help me and teach me and that makes a big difference. And again, this is where there's, I think, that negative component of being a realtor that people don't see that, and you tend to feel like maybe I'm just another number and it doesn't really matter. So
Yeah,
it's nice
isn't
that you
that
take that
even
time.
even I feel that way because
Mhm.
I'm getting those same calls that you are from random people, right? And that works for some people and that's amazing. But, even for yourself, there's 73,000 realtors in the Toronto area, right? And there's lots of people in all our professions. So you just have to understand that, the sphere that you have, the relationships you build are where you're at and your business, not saying that can't grow, but valuing what you already have instead of always looking for more.
I agree. Value what you have. I think you've hit the nail on the head. Like, be grateful that that's what you have, and like I said, people will see that, and it makes a difference because you may get those, clients at the beginning, it may work, but then once you feel like you're just a number, that person doesn't really care. You
Mhm,
work hard for your money. Okay. And the market that we're in right now it's crazy. Although prices have dropped, prices are still astronomical. And so you want to feel like somebody cares and they're not just looking to get that commission. And that's the way it can feel a lot of the time where it's like,
mhm.
do you care what I'm looking for? Like, I have all of these boxes that need to be checked, and you seem to be showing me things that
Yeah.
don't fit, don't align with what I want. And you just seems like I'm just something on your to-do list rather
Yeah,
than,
exactly.
and that's the frustrating thing. It's like, this is my money. I work hard for it. It's a lot of money. You know, not everybody can afford a house at this day and age. And so you want to feel valued by the person that you're working with that's, dealing with that amount of money. And it's a big investment in your life, and a life investment for most people. So,
And it's funny because when you work with people that aren't aligned to you, I guess, you realize at the end of the day how awful it is on your psyche, like how much it takes from you. So I don't think that it's worth the end dollar to sacrifice that anymore. I think I mean, I said that before. So, but in terms of you asked me before what I learned. I think that what I've learned is, which it crosses all barriers, all fields, is you really need to build a solid foundation of who you are and be comfortable with who you are. Because, especially in the real estate game, it's all comparison. It's all awards for numbers, for volume. And when you don't meet those numbers, then it's hard. It's hard to feel like you're not a failure. So you have to be able to be comfortable with who you are and where you're at. Bottom line.
yeah. So let's stay on the real estate side of things right now, and we'll just pivot a little bit. What do you see as some of the challenges right now, just in the market in general? And how are you working with your clients? The market right now, it's a seller's market, I think, for the most part. What's inventory like, and what's the market like? And like I said, how are you pivoting and helping your clients?
Well, okay. So I have been fortunate enough to get into this niche, which is an unfortunate niche, which is power of sale properties. And so there's a lot of education that needs to go into that. But the difference between a power of sale property and the properties that, are on the market because people are choosing to sell is is that there's no emotion involved. And so for the general realtor, I just want to say that you really need to educate your client on the price that their home is worth versus the market price, like the actual market price. And that's why, power of sale properties they're not cheap deals. You're not getting something just because someone else is suffering. You're getting what the market price is, which could be $100,000 less than your neighbor, but your neighbor's selling because they want to try to make the most they can because they want to for whatever their reasons are, right? So, I'm bringing that up just to say that I think that's the hardest thing right now is educating people who are selling on what the market bears for their price, and then maybe letting them see on the other side of it with what they're doing, to buy in the future, that whatever they're losing, they're making up. Or, like there's never like a right time in the market to do these things because there's always a trade-off one way or another. So if it's the right time in their life, you have to make it work for them.
Mhm. I think that's good advice. Base it upon not necessarily the market. I mean, that's part of it, but also, does it make sense in your life? And where are you in your life, and how can you make it work to fit your life? So I think that's important to remember, that you can try to play the market, but it's not always going to work in your favor.
Sorry, if you have a seller who is just adamant about the price, like the initial price that goes on when you list something is the crucial moment because if you go too high, it sits, and then people make assumptions and then either it sits because they think it's not, there's something wrong with it or it's priced too high and no one looks at it like that. That's all I would say. If anything, it's people are so savvy now. The buyer, like, you can look, you have access to almost all the same information I do. So you already know when you use a realtor, pretty much what the market is, everything. So that's why I think the realtor's main job now is to work with sellers to be realistic.
Right. And that makes sense. That makes sense. Are you seeing a lot of closing issues? Like I know you said you deal with a lot of power of sales, but with maybe people that bought 5 years ago when the market was really high and now their house is closing. So maybe like a new build, for example, their house is closing. Are you seeing issues? Are people able to close? Is that
Yeah, I mean, it's a changing market for sure, and because there's a lot of realtor chats, there's a lot of assignment sales, and a lot of people are losing a lot of money, and even when they are closing, they're closing with regret and disdain. I have one woman who I know who by the time she closed, she would be paying $2,500 more than what she would be getting for a rent. So, you know what? It doesn't even make sense for her to close. It really
yeah,
doesn't. So
yeah.
that's the sad reality.
Yeah, and I've been hearing that too, where a lot of people are exactly selling on consignment because it doesn't make sense to hold it, and it's a really sad time for those individuals that are in that predicament. Yeah, I guess we'll
But
see.
there is business to be had, I would just say. There's business to be had, and, I know I said before it isn't about cold calling and door knocking, but I do think if you leverage the relationships that you have, even if you're chatting with your when you're getting your hair done or your nails or whatever, there or like you said earlier, just your attitude and your personality, and, I really believe in giving to get, so just putting yourself out there, making a phone call. Is there anything I can do for you? How are you? Those kinds of little efforts will make your day, make you feel better about your day. And then from there, I do think it will translate into business. I just don't think people should rest on their laurels and say, "Oh, it's a bad market, so I have no business." You can always try.
That I agree with. That I agree with. There's always a solution, and it's just a matter of are you willing to put in the work? It's easy just to fall back on. It's too hard. I don't want to do it. And we can say that
Mhm.
in anything that you do. I think that's human nature to be like, it's too hard. I don't want to do it, or it's never going to work for me, or and so on and so forth. So you can make a million excuses, or you can actually put in the work and figure out a solution.
Mhm.
There's always a solution out there. Absolutely. I believe that. Let's talk a little bit more about the veil and where that's going and the types of events that you provide and who it's open to.
Yes, so I have big plans for that. Although, again, in that space, there's women's groups popping up all the time. So, it is a little intimidating thinking you're doing something and someone else is already there in that space. But I think there's a space for all of us. And for me, there's women who have started women's groups from coming to some of our events. And I love that because for whatever reason, they have their own market, their own niche. And I would love to collab more with other people. I think that it just only benefits us, which is little bit of a rare thought process. But to me, I hope that we do that more. For us with the veil, we we're getting more into education, I guess I would say. I felt like people just wanted to network, but it actually turns out that you need a little bit of blend of both. So, for example, we do have an event coming up in April we have 3 panelists coming on and we're doing like an office not re-decor because we don't know what they look like, but like office tips for I guess having your best positive space, updating your wardrobe and updating your makeup. Which for me, I was like, I went actually a couple weeks ago to get my makeup done for the first time. I was like, I'm in my 50s and no one ever taught me how to put on makeup. So how crazy is that? I took my daughter with me who's 22 and she said, that was the best gift I ever could have given her. So it's
Oh,
funny, those little things you take for granted.
yeah, I think you're right. We do take them for granted and we think, oh, it's good enough. And then you realize, wow, like there's whether it be dressing or doing your makeup or just, yeah, how to put together a room so that it's attractive, I think are important things that we overlook. And we, unfortunately or fortunately, I think, you know, the visual aspect of things is important. This is what people see when they walk into your office. This is what people see when they look at you. And so I think those little tweaks can, I think, go a long way. So
Mhm.
I think that's fantastic. And I like the fact that you said that you're somebody that's open to collaborating and supporting other women that are using what you've done to start their own thing. And I think that's fantastic. We don't always support each other. We say we do, and then we don't always necessarily put in that effort to really support other women and other entrepreneurs and other business owners. And it's nice to hear you actually collaborating with other people and bringing them in and supporting and lifting each other up, not just saying it, but actually doing it because that's important. We
Well,
help each other.
to my point, our events currently are in the Vaughan Chamber of Commerce boardroom. So that's, I feel like that was also nice on their part, but it just elevates and gives you more exposure to more people who you can help. So hopefully, we are doing these events. We are really promoting the fact that if you come and you're a part of who we are, that we are a network that does support each other, which I started out by saying, and we walk the talk. And then on top of that, Josephine and I have been working on a course which we're calling her second act. Sometimes I say it's her first act 2.0, but it's about leveling up your systems, leveling up where you're at, trying to quiet some of the noise because I know we all see videos and we all get information every single day on CRMs, on AI, on, even business accounting, things like that. So just from our experience, just what you need, what you don't need, and how to grow a new business or how to level up your existing business.
I love that. Sharon, before we wrap things up, is there anything else you want to share with us that we haven't spoken about yet?
No, I mean, I appreciate the time you gave me.
Awesome. Well, I do want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your experiences. And I think, again, you're another example of someone that rather than playing the victim, you can live in your own misery or you can turn your life around. And that's what you've done. And so you're an inspiration for doing that. And you continue to be transformative in the things that you do and continue to grow and evolve. And that's beautiful to see. And you continue to inspire all of us around you. So thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for the kind words and right back at you.
Sharon, this has been such an inspiring conversation. What stands out the most to me about your story is that it really is a reminder that leadership doesn't come from following a script. It comes from knowing who you are, trusting your voice, and having the courage to build something meaningful, even when the path isn't obvious. Thank you for sharing your journey, your lessons, and the mindset that helped you create success in your own way. And to everyone listening, if this conversation resonated with you, share this episode with someone who needs that reminder and know that there is no single path to success, but the most powerful one is the path that's authentically yours. That wraps today's episode of The Amanda Gervasi Show. Until next time, remember, stay bold, stay curious, and always live life fearlessly. You earned it.